Welcome to Detective Tales, where mysteries unfold and every detail matters. Inspired by the timeless works of Agatha Christie, this channel brings you classic-style detective stories filled with suspense, hidden motives, and unexpected revelations. Here, you'll walk alongside brilliant minds like Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple, unraveling puzzles where nothing is quite as it seems. Prepare yourself for intrigue, atmosphere, and a journey into the golden age of detective fiction. The case begins now.
Some mysteries begin with a murder, others with a letter, a whisper, or the flicker of doubt in someone's eyes. But no matter how the case begins, you can be sure of one thing. Hercule Poirot will follow every clue with precision, logic, and those little grey cells. Welcome to Warm Pages. I'm your host, Hari. Isn't it wonderful how these stories bring us together from all across the world? While you listen, tell us in the comments, where are you joining from? And do you try to solve the mystery before Poirot does? Let's begin. Chapter 1. An Invitation to Blackwood. It was one of those November evenings in London when the fog seems to creep through every crevice, enveloping the city in a ghostly shroud. The year was 1925, and I had returned to England after a brief sojourn in Argentina, finding myself once again in the company of my old friend, Hercule Poirot. I recall the evening with particular clarity, for it marked the beginning of what would prove to be one of the most perplexing cases of his illustrious career. We sat in comfortable silence in his meticulously arranged flat in London, the warmth of the fire contrasting sharply with the dismal weather outside. Poirot was engaged in the construction of a card house, his nimble fingers placing each card with surgical precision. I observed him from behind my newspaper, marveling as always at his concentration. The perfect symmetry of his mustaches and the egg-shaped head which he so prided himself upon were illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp beside him. "Hastings," he said suddenly, without looking up from his delicate architecture, "do you not find it curious that the criminal mind so often betrays itself through its desire for pattern and order?" I lowered my newspaper. I hadn't given him much thought, old chap. "Ah, but you should, mon ami," he replied, placing another card with exquisite care. The very qualities that make for the successful detective, method, order, and the little grey cells, are often present in those we pursue. It is the application which differs. Before I could respond, Mrs. Pearson, Poirot's housekeeper, entered with a card upon a silver tray. "Inspector Japp to see you, sir," she announced. "He says it's a matter of some urgency." Poirot sighed as his gaze fell upon the card house. With a philosophical shrug, he nodded. "Show him in, if you please." Moments later, Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard strode into the room, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the faint smell of damp wool. I had always found Japp to be a competent, if somewhat unimaginative, detective, a fact which Poirot had mentioned on numerous occasions with a mixture of affection and exasperation. "Evening, Poirot. Captain Hastings," he greeted us, removing his hat to reveal hair flattened by its weight. His face was flushed from the cold, his expression suggesting a man with matters of significance on his mind. "Ah, mon cher Japp," Poirot responded, gesturing gracefully to an armchair. "To what do we owe the pleasure of your company on this most disagreeable evening?" Japp settled into the chair, producing an envelope from his coat pocket. "I've something here that might interest you, Poirot. Came across my desk this afternoon. A letter from a Lady Eleanor Blackwood." "Blackwood?" I interjected. "Not of the Devonshire Blackwoods?" "The very same," Japp confirmed. "Old family, old money, old house, and apparently a very new problem." Poirot accepted the envelope delicately between his fingers, examining the high-quality paper and elegant handwriting before carefully opening it. His eyes moved methodically across the page as he read, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he passed the letter to me. The handwriting was indeed elegant, if somewhat unsteady, as though written in haste or under great strain. It detailed a most curious occurrence, the inexplicable disappearance of Major Richard Blackwood, the brother-in-law of Lady Eleanor, from a locked bedroom during a family gathering at Blackwood Manor. "A locked room mystery, Poirot," Japp commented with a knowing smile. "Rather up your street, I'd say." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "There is more to it than that, I think. The lady writes that the room was under observation throughout the night." "That's right," Japp confirmed. "Family member took ill. The daughter, I believe, and the doctor and nurse were up all night, with a clear view of the corridor. Swear no one entered or left the major's room. Yet when they knocked in the morning, no answer. Door locked from the inside, key still in the lock. When they finally broke in, the room was empty. The windows, I asked. Original Tudor iron grills, Japp replied. Bars too narrow for a child to squeeze through, let alone a full-grown man. Poirot rose from his chair and paced the room with small, precise steps. And you say this is a family of some prominence, Inspector? One of the oldest baronetcies in Devonshire, Japp confirmed. Sir Henry Blackwood isn't one to invite scandal, but he's desperate, it seems. The local police are baffled. Poirot paused by the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded street below. When did this disappearance occur? 3 nights ago, Japp replied. They've searched the grounds, dragged the lake, questioned the servants. Nothing. I observed my friend closely, recognizing the gleam in his eye that indicated his interest had been piqued. The fog pressed against the window pane like a living thing, and in that moment, it seemed to me that it concealed not just the streets of London, but a multitude of secrets waiting to be uncovered. And this Major Blackwood, Poirot inquired. He had recently returned from abroad, yes. Japp looked surprised. How did you know that? Poirot smiled enigmatically. The letter mentions his recent return. Where from, if I may ask? India, Japp supplied. Colonial service. Been out there for years, from what I gather. I see. Poirot returned to his seat, his fingers forming a steeple beneath his chin. And there is another detail which interests me greatly. The lady mentions that the Major had recently announced his intention to contest Sir Henry's inheritance of the estate. Curious timing for a disappearance, is it not? Japp shifted uncomfortably. That's partly why I'm here, Poirot. The circumstances are delicate. I'd rather have someone of your discretion looking into it before we start making accusations within a family like the Blackwoods. Poirot was silent for a moment, his eyes half closed in contemplation. I knew better than to interrupt his thoughts. Finally, he opened his eyes and straightened in his chair. Very well, mon ami. Hastings and I shall depart for Devonshire tomorrow morning. The case presents features of interest, and I confess I am intrigued by this impossible disappearance. As Japp rose to leave, visibly relieved, Poirot added with a slight smile. Besides, it has been too long since we have taken a journey to the English countryside, has it not, Hastings? I agreed, though with a strange sense of foreboding. The locked room, the family tensions, the remote manor house, all the elements of a mystery that would test even Hercule Poirot's famous little grey cells to their limit. Little did I know then how prophetic that sense of foreboding would prove to be, or what strange and terrible secrets awaited us at Blackwood Manor. Chapter 2. The Empty Room. Our journey to Devonshire the following morning was marked by deteriorating weather conditions that seemed to mirror the gravity of the case before us. Rain lashed against the windows of our railway carriage, and leaden skies hung low over the increasingly rugged landscape. Poirot, who typically detested any form of travel that disturbed his immaculate appearance, sat in uncharacteristic silence, his eyes half closed in contemplation. You were thinking of the locked room, I suppose, I ventured, after we had passed the halfway point of our journey. Not merely of the room, mon ami, he replied, opening his eyes. I am thinking of the psychology. Always it is the psychology that interests me most. The psychology of the disappearance? Précisément. Consider Hastings. A man returns from years abroad, challenges his brother's inheritance, and then vanishes from a locked room. Why choose such a method? If Major Blackwood wished to disappear of his own accord, why do so in a manner guaranteed to cause the maximum of intrigue and investigation? I'd pondered this. Perhaps he didn't disappear voluntarily. Ah, then we must ask ourselves, if someone wished him harm, why not employ a method more conclusive? And how did they achieve the impossible feat of removing him from a locked room under observation? The remainder of our journey was spent in contemplation of these questions, interrupted only by the occasional brief stops at rural stations where passengers disembarked into the driving rain. By mid-afternoon, we found ourselves in a motor car sent from Blackwood Manor, winding through narrow lanes flanked by ancient hedgerows that seemed to close in behind us like the pages of a book. Blackwood Manor emerged from the mist like a spectral vision, a sprawling Tudor edifice of weathered stone and dark timber, its numerous chimneys silhouetted against the turbulent sky. The east wing, which I would later learn was the site of the disappearance, appeared particularly forbidding, with narrow windows that seemed to observe our arrival with malevolent intent. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. It is like something from one of your English ghost stories, is it not? Before I could reply, the heavy oak door swung open, revealing a tall, thin butler whose impassive face suggested he had witnessed enough Blackwood family dramas to remain unmoved by yet another. He conducted us into a vast entrance hall where a woman waited, her hands clasped tightly before her. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I am Lady Eleanor Blackwood. Thank you for coming so promptly. Lady Eleanor was a woman of perhaps 45, with the remains of what must once have been considerable beauty now ravaged by anxiety. Her pale blue eyes darted nervously between us, and I noticed her hands trembled slightly as she gestured for us to follow her. My husband is in the library with Dr. Mortimer, our family physician. They are most eager to speak with you. The situation has become quite unbearable. The servants are whispering of the family curse, and my daughter Cecily is beside herself with distress. She led us through a maze of corridors adorned with ancestral portraits, whose eyes seemed to follow our progress with aristocratic disdain. The library, when we reached it, was a magnificent room lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by a massive stone fireplace in which logs crackled and spat. Two men rose as we entered. The elder, whom Lady Eleanor introduced as Sir Henry Blackwood, was a stout, red-faced gentleman with the authoritative bearing of one accustomed to command. Dr. Mortimer, by contrast, was slight and scholarly, with wire-rimmed spectacles and prematurely greying hair at his temples. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Henry boomed, advancing to shake hands. Your reputation precedes you. I trust Inspector Japp has briefed you on the extraordinary events that have occurred beneath my roof. He has provided the outline, yes, Poirot replied. But I should prefer to hear the details from you, Sir Henry. And afterwards, I must examine the room from which the Major vanished. Sir Henry nodded grimly. 3 nights ago, my brother-in-law retired to his room at approximately 10 o'clock, following a rather heated discussion at dinner regarding certain family matters. These matters being his claim upon the estate, Poirot inquired delicately. Sir Henry's face darkened. Precisely. Richard returned from India with wild notions about irregularities in my father's will. Preposterous, of course. The entail is quite clear. Nevertheless, he threatened legal proceedings. He sighed heavily. We parted on poor terms that night. And then, Poirot prompted. Dr. Mortimer stepped forward. I was attending Miss Cecily, who had developed a severe migraine following the dinner table tensions. My room is opposite the corridor from Major Blackwood's, and I sat up with Cecily until dawn. I can state with absolute certainty that no one entered or left the Major's room during the night. Yet in the morning, Lady Eleanor continued, her voice faltering, when Richard failed to appear for breakfast, we knocked upon his door. There was no answer. The key was in the lock, from the inside. When we finally managed to open the door, the room was empty. She shuddered visibly. It is as though the old house simply swallowed him. Lady Lavinia, Sir Henry's sister, believes it to be the work of the Black Monk, Dr. Mortimer added, with the faintest suggestion of skepticism in his tone. The Black Monk? I inquired. A family ghost, Sir Henry replied dismissively. Medieval nonsense. Richard himself claimed to have seen the spectral figure shortly after his return. Overwrought imagination, if you ask me. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. I should like to speak with Lady Lavinia and Miss Cecily later. But first, the room, if you please. Sir Henry led us up a grand staircase and along a corridor that grew noticeably colder as we approached the east wing. The floorboards creaked ominously beneath our feet, and I felt a distinct sensation of being watched, though the corridor was empty, save for ourselves. We have preserved everything exactly as it was found, Sir Henry explained, producing a key. Nothing has been touched. The door swung open to reveal a spacious bedchamber, dominated by a 4-poster bed with heavy velvet curtains. A masculine dressing table stood by the window, upon which were arranged a silver-backed hairbrush, a cut-throat razor, and various other toiletries. A military trunk lay open beside the wardrobe, its contents partly unpacked. The bed itself was unmade, but showed no signs of having been slept in. Poirot moved immediately to the windows, examining the iron grilles that Sir Henry had mentioned. They were indeed substantial. Narrow, ancient ironwork set deeply into the stone. I tested one and found it immovable. The chimney? Poirot inquired, turning to the fireplace. Too narrow for a child to climb, let alone a man of Richard's build, Sir Henry replied. And in any case, it was examined thoroughly. Poirot began his methodical examination of the room, moving with the precision that I had so often observed in him. Nothing escaped his attention. The arrangement of items on the dressing table, the contents of the military trunk, the position of the furniture. I noticed that he paid particular attention to a glass of water on the bedside table, going so far as to hold it up to the light. Tell me, Sir Henry, he said suddenly, what medication did the Major take for his heart condition? Sir Henry looked startled. How did you? Yes, Richard suffered from a weak heart. He took Digitalin regularly. Dr. Mortimer prescribed it. Dr. Mortimer nodded confirmation. The medication is missing, along with his pocket watch and an ivory elephant figurine he always carried. We assumed he had them with him when he vanished. Poirot knelt suddenly, examining the carpet near the bed. And whose boot, would you say, made this impression in the pile? We all looked where he indicated. A single, distinct footprint was visible in the deep carpet, a muddy mark that had dried, leaving a perfect impression. Good heavens, exclaimed Sir Henry. I hadn't noticed that before. Dr. Mortimer frowned, adjusting his spectacles. It matches no footwear in the household, as far as I'm aware. Most curious, Poirot murmured, more to himself than to us. He continued his examination, moving to a book that lay open on a small writing desk. The Major was interested in Indian mythology. He developed a fascination with Eastern philosophies during his time abroad, Lady Eleanor explained. That particular volume discusses the disappearing tricks of Indian fakirs, I believe. Poirot raised an eyebrow, but made no comment. He completed his examination by scrutinizing the lock on the door, testing the key, and measuring the gap beneath the door with a small ruler he produced from his pocket. And now, he said finally, straightening up, I should like to speak with each member of the household separately. But first, one question, if I may. Did anyone hear unusual noises on the night of the disappearance? The three exchanged glances. I heard a strange scraping sound around midnight, Lady Eleanor offered, hesitantly, like furniture being moved. I distinctly heard tapping, Dr. Mortimer added. A rhythmic sound, almost like a code. I assumed it was a branch against a window. And I, Sir Henry concluded grimly, heard what sounded like a muffled cry. But when I investigated, there was nothing. Only the silence of this accursed house. As we left the room, Poirot paused on the threshold, his expression thoughtful. I knew that look well. It was the expression he wore when the pieces of a puzzle were beginning to arrange themselves in his mind. Our next interview was with Lady Lavinia, Sir Henry's unmarried sister, a formidable woman with iron grey hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate and dismiss us in a single glance. She received us in a small sitting room, her back ramrod straight, her hands folded in her lap. So you're the famous detective, she remarked, studying Poirot. I wonder if even your celebrated methods can unravel what has happened here. This house has secrets that go back centuries, Monsieur Poirot. It is not the secrets of centuries that concern me, madame, but the events of 3 nights ago, Poirot replied smoothly. They are connected, she insisted. Richard saw the Black Monk the week before he vanished. He told me so himself, and the monk left him a message. A message? I couldn't help interjecting. Lady Lavinia reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, which she handed to Poirot. Richard gave this to me for safekeeping the day before he disappeared. I haven't shown it to Henry. He has no patience for what he calls a superstitious nonsense. Poirot unfolded the paper carefully. In a bold, masculine hand were written the words, "The monk knows where the treasure lies." Treasure? Poirot inquired, raising an eyebrow. The Blackwood treasure, Lady Lavinia confirmed, lowering her voice dramatically. Lost since the Reformation. Richard believed he had found clues to its location in the family papers. As we left Lady Lavinia's company, I could see that gleam in Poirot's eye, the unmistakable sign that he had discovered something significant. Whatever strange forces were at work at Blackwood Manor, I had absolute faith that my friend's little grey cells would ultimately triumph over them. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Library. The remainder of the afternoon was occupied with interviews of the household staff, none of which, I must confess, yielded information of particular significance. The cook, a corpulent woman named Mrs. Hawkins, had heard nothing unusual. The two housemaids had been asleep in their quarters above the kitchen, and the chauffeur had spent the evening in the village pub, returning shortly before midnight, at which time he observed nothing amiss. "It is most curious, is it not, Hastings?" Poirot remarked as we retired to the guest chambers that had been prepared for us. "A man vanishes from a locked room, leaving behind the most essential of his personal items, yet taking with him specific objects of seemingly little value." "The pocket watch might be valuable," I suggested. "Peut-être. But the ivory elephant, the heart medication. No, mon ami, there is purpose here. Method. I should like to examine the family library more closely tomorrow. The answers, I suspect, lie in the history of this most interesting household." True to his word, Poirot directed his attention to the library immediately after breakfast the following morning. Lady Eleanor had informed us that the room contained historical records of the estate dating back to its foundation. It was an impressive chamber, 2 stories in height, with a gallery running around the upper level. Rows upon rows of leather-bound volumes lined the shelves, and a magnificent oak table dominated the center of the room, upon which were spread maps and documents. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," came a voice from the gallery above. "I see you share my interest in family history." We looked up to see Cecily Blackwood leaning over the balustrade, a slender young woman of perhaps 20 years, with the same pale blue eyes as her mother, but possessed of a quiet intensity that Lady Eleanor lacked. She descended the spiral staircase with graceful steps, a leather-bound volume clasped in her hands. "I was searching for information about the Black Monk," she explained, placing the book upon the table. "Uncle Richard became quite obsessed with the legend after his return." Poirot smiled encouragingly. "Perhaps you would be so kind as to share this legend with us, mademoiselle." Cecily opened the ancient tome, revealing pages of faded script, interspersed with illuminated capitals. The story dates to the time of Henry VIII and the dissolution of the monasteries. The nearby abbey was being destroyed, and one monk fled with sacred treasures, gold vessels, jeweled reliquaries, illuminated manuscripts. He sought sanctuary at Blackwood, which was known to shelter Catholic sympathizers. "And what became of this monk?" Poirot inquired, his eyes bright with interest. Cecily's voice dropped to a near whisper. "He was murdered within these walls, by one of my ancestors, it is said, for the treasures he carried." She ran her finger along a passage of text. "Since that day, his shade has been seen walking the east wing, dressed in the black habit of his order, seeking eternal justice." "Most dramatic," Poirot murmured. "And your Uncle Richard believed he had seen this spectral figure." "He claimed to have encountered the monk in the corridor outside his room a week before his disappearance," Cecily confirmed. "He was quite shaken by the experience." "Your uncle also appears to have developed an interest in family documents," Poirot observed, glancing at the papers spread across the table. "These are records of the estate." "Some are architectural plans of the original Tudor manor," Cecily replied. "Uncle Richard spent hours studying them. He believed the house contained secret passages, priest holes constructed during the persecution of Catholics. My father thought it was all nonsense, of course." At this moment, Sir Henry entered the library, his expression darkening slightly at the sight of his daughter in earnest conversation with us. "I see Cecily has been filling your head with our family ghost story," he remarked dryly. "I hope you haven't been wasting these gentlemen's time, my dear." "On the contrary, Sir Henry," Poirot replied smoothly. "Mademoiselle Cecily has provided most valuable context. Would it be possible, I wonder, to examine the family records more thoroughly, particularly those pertaining to the original construction of the manor?" Sir Henry hesitated, a flicker of something, reluctance perhaps, crossing his face before he nodded curtly. "As you wish. The documents are kept in the cabinet by the fireplace. The key is in my desk drawer. If you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have estate business to attend to." As Sir Henry strode from the room, I noticed Cecily watching her father with a strange expression, one I could not quite interpret. "Is there something else you wish to tell us, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked gently. She hesitated, glancing toward the door through which her father had departed. "Uncle Richard wasn't merely interested in the priest holes, Monsieur Poirot. He believed he had found evidence of the Blackwood treasure, the religious artifacts brought here by the Black Monk. He was convinced they remained hidden somewhere within the house." "And your father dismissed this notion?" "Quite vehemently," she replied. "There were terrible arguments. Uncle Richard claimed that as the younger son, my grandfather had no right to inherit over my Uncle Richard's father, who was the elder. He said the proof was among the family papers and that he would use it to reclaim what was rightfully his. After Cecily had left us, Poirot proceeded to unlock the cabinet, revealing stacks of ancient documents, yellowed with age and bound with faded ribbon. We must proceed with great care, Hastings, he instructed, donning a pair of white cotton gloves he had somehow produced from his pocket. These papers are irreplaceable. For the next 2 hours, we carefully examined the family records. There were letters, legal documents, household accounts, and architectural drawings, some dating back to the early 16th century. Poirot paid particular attention to a set of plans showing the original layout of the manor. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured, indicating a section of the east wing. "The walls are of unusual thickness, are they not? And note this chamber. It does not appear to correspond to any room we have seen thus far." As he spoke, his finger traced a small rectangular space, seemingly embedded within the thickness of the wall adjacent to the room from which Major Richard had vanished. "Good Lord!" I exclaimed. "A priest hole, do you think?" "It is a distinct possibility," Poirot replied. "But where might the entrance be located? These plans do not indicate any access point." We continued our examination, uncovering further intriguing details, references in estate accounts to payments made to discreet craftsmen during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, and a letter from Sir Francis Walsingham, the Queen's spymaster, warning of a search for Catholic recusants that was to be conducted in the area. The evidence suggests that Blackwood Manor was indeed a haven for Catholic priests during the persecution, Poirot concluded, and such houses invariably contained secret passages and chambers for concealment. As he spoke, he lifted a medieval manuscript with particular care. I noticed that he examined not only its contents, but also the binding and the surface of the table beneath it. "Most interesting," he murmured. "Observe these wax drippings, Hastings. And here, fingerprints in the dust. Someone has studied this manuscript recently, and with great attention. Major Richard? Possibly, but note the size of the prints. They are rather small for a military man, are they not?" Before I could respond, our attention was drawn to a disturbance in the doorway. Lady Lavinia stood there, her imperious gaze fixed upon us with evident disapproval. "I might have known I would find you here," she remarked coldly. "Disturbing family papers that are no concern of outsiders." "With Sir Henry's permission, I assure you, madame," Poirot replied, unruffled by her hostility. "We are attempting to understand Major Richard's activities in the days before his disappearance." Lady Lavinia sniffed dismissively. "My nephew was a romantic, Monsieur Poirot. He saw mysteries where none existed." "And yet, a mystery undeniably exists now, does it not?" Poirot countered gently. "A man has vanished from a locked room in most impossible circumstances." A curious expression flitted across Lady Lavinia's face, a mixture of concern and something else I could not quite place. "Have you considered, Monsieur Poirot, that Richard may have wished to disappear? He was not a happy man. His obsession with the past had become unhealthy." "An interesting theory," Poirot acknowledged, "but it does not explain how he accomplished such a disappearance from a locked room under observation." After Lady Lavinia had departed, Poirot returned to his examination of the documents with renewed concentration. Some time later, he straightened up suddenly, a frown creasing his forehead. "Is something missing, Hastings?" he asked. I glanced at the orderly arrangement of papers before us. I couldn't say. There are so many documents. Précisément, yet I have a distinct impression. He consulted the catalogue of family papers that lay open beside him. "Ah, here we are. According to this inventory, there should be a complete set of the original architectural plans dated 1542. Yet several pages appear to be missing, specifically those detailing the east wing and its foundation. Could they simply have been misfiled?" "It is possible," Poirot conceded, "but in conjunction with the other curious features of this case, I find the coincidence suggestive." Our research was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Mortimer, who appeared somewhat flustered. "Ah, gentlemen, there you are. Lady Eleanor was concerned when you did not appear for luncheon. She wondered if perhaps you had made some progress in your investigation." "We are pursuing certain lines of inquiry," Poirot replied, non-committally. "Tell me, Doctor Mortimer, How long has Major Richard been taking Digitalin for his heart condition? The doctor blinked, seemingly taken aback by the question. For several years, I understand. The condition developed during his time in India. A bout of rheumatic fever, I believe. And the prescription, it was your own? No, no. He brought it with him from London. His Harley Street physician had prescribed it. I merely confirmed that the dosage was appropriate and advised him to continue. I see. And this physician's name? I'm afraid I don't recall. Is it relevant? Perhaps not, Poirot replied with a slight smile. One more question, if I may. On the night of the disappearance, you mentioned hearing tapping sounds. Could you describe them more precisely? Dr. Mortimer hesitated. It was a rhythmic noise, 3 short taps, followed by a pause, then 3 more. As I said, I assumed it was a branch against a window. And yet, there are no trees near the east wing windows, are there? The doctor's face flushed slightly. I suppose there aren't, now that you mention it. How strange that I didn't consider that. After Dr. Mortimer had left us, Poirot returned the documents carefully to their cabinet, locking it with the key. I think, Hastings, he said thoughtfully, that we should speak with the groundskeeper. If anyone knows the secrets of this ancient house, it will be one who has tended its grounds for many years. As we made our way from the library, I noticed Poirot glance back at the massive oak table where we had been working. Following his gaze, I observed a small dark shape protruding slightly from beneath a heavy tome. Poirot moved swiftly, extracting the object with delicate precision. It was a wax seal impression, broken from some document, and upon its surface was the distinct image of a monk in flowing robes, his head bowed in prayer. The plot thickens, mon ami, Poirot murmured, slipping the seal into his pocket. Let us see what the groundskeeper can tell us of monks and treasures and secrets long buried. Chapter 4. The Groundskeeper's Tale. The afternoon had grown late by the time we ventured outdoors in search of the groundskeeper. The rain had abated temporarily, leaving the ground shrouded in a thin mist that clung to the ancient yew hedges and rose in ghostly tendrils from the sodden lawns. Poirot, who normally displayed a fastidious aversion to inclement weather and its deleterious effects upon his patent leather shoes, seemed uncharacteristically eager to explore the exterior of the manor. We must view the house from all angles, Hastings, he explained, picking his way carefully along a gravel path that skirted the east wing. The solution to our locked room mystery may well lie outside, rather than within. We discovered Thomas Hawkins in a stone outbuilding that served as both tool shed and workshop. He was a weathered man of perhaps 70 years, his face deeply lined from decades of outdoor labor, yet his eyes remained sharp and observant beneath bushy white brows. He was engaged in the repair of an ancient wooden bench, his gnarled hands working with surprising dexterity. Mr. Hawkins, I began, we're assisting in the investigation of Major Richard's disappearance. Might we have a word? The old man straightened slowly, regarding us with a measured gaze. You'll be the detective from London then, he said, addressing Poirot. The one they say can solve puzzles no one else can manage. Poirot inclined his head modestly. I have had some success in that regard, yes. I understand you have served the Blackwood family for many years. 53 years come Michaelmas, Hawkins confirmed. Started as a garden boy when Sir Henry's father was master here. Seen 3 generations of Blackwoods, I have. Then you know this estate better than anyone, I imagine, Poirot suggested, his tone conversational. It's history. It's secrets, perhaps? A guarded expression crossed the groundskeeper's weathered features. Every old house has its secrets, sir. Not my place to speak of them, even when they might pertain to a man's disappearance, or perhaps his safety. Poirot pressed gently. Hawkins hesitated, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. What is it you want to know exactly? I understand Major Richard had been asking questions about certain features of the property, Poirot replied. The old well, for instance, and the sealed cellars beneath the east wing. The old man's eyes widened slightly. How did you know about that? It is my business to know things, Mr. Hawkins, Poirot said with a small smile. Was the Major interested in these places? Hawkins nodded reluctantly. Came to me about a week after his return, he did. Full of questions about the old parts of the house. Wanted to know about the well and the cellars that were sealed up in Sir Henry's father's time. Sealed up? I inquired. For what reason? There was a collapse back in 97, Hawkins explains. Part of the old foundations gave way after heavy rains. Sir Henry's father had the whole section walled up, said it was unsafe. But Major Richard was curious about these areas nevertheless, Poirot prompted. Obsessed, more like, Hawkins affirmed. Kept asking if I'd ever heard tell of tunnels or passages connecting the well to the house. Old monastic tunnels, he called them. And had you? The groundskeeper shifted uncomfortably. There are stories. Nothing I've ever seen myself, you understand. But my father worked these grounds before me, and his father before him. They spoke of passageways built when the monastery was torn down, ways for priests to come and go unseen during Queen Elizabeth's time. Most interesting, Poirot murmured. And did you share these stories with Major Richard? I did, though I told him they were likely just tales. But he was convinced they were true. Said he'd found evidence in old books and papers. Did he speak of finding treasure, Mr. Hawkins? I asked, recalling the cryptic note about the monk. A shadow seemed to pass over the old man's face. The Blackwood treasure. Aye, he mentioned it. Many have saw it over the centuries, sir. None have found it. Some say it's cursed. Cursed? Poirot raised an eyebrow. The monk's revenge, Hawkins replied in a lower voice. They say he cursed those who murdered him, and all who would seek the sacred objects he died protecting. Poirot appeared to consider this for a moment. You speak of superstitions, Mr. Hawkins, but I am interested in facts. In your 53 years of service, have you ever observed anything unusual about the east wing of the house? Anything that might explain how a man could vanish from a locked room? The groundskeeper was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward the mist-shrouded walls of the manor. When I was a young man, he said finally, before that part of the house was closed off, I sometimes saw lights in the east wing at night. Moving lights, like someone carrying a lantern from room to room. But when I mentioned it to the master, Sir Henry's father, that would be, he forbade me to speak of it again. And when was the east wing closed off? Shortly after the cellar collapse in 97, Sir Henry's father had the connecting doors sealed and the rooms locked up, said they were structurally unsound. They remained that way until Major Richard insisted on using one as his bedchamber upon his return. One final question, if I may, Poirot said. Did you observe any interaction between Major Richard and Dr. Mortimer in the days before the disappearance? Hawkins' expression grew more guarded. I couldn't say, sir. But you did observe something, Poirot persisted. Something that troubled you, perhaps. The old man sighed. I saw them arguing, the day before the Major vanished. In the garden, by the old well. Couldn't hear what was said, but they were at it hammer and tongs. The doctor looked proper upset. And did Major Richard speak to you after this argument? Came to me that very afternoon, Hawkins confirmed, asking questions about the old servant's entrance on the east side. Said he'd found reference to it in some book, but couldn't locate it on the grounds. And this entrance, it exists. Used to. Was bricked up during renovations in Sir Henry's father's time. It led to a narrow staircase that connected to the kitchen cellars. I see, Poirot murmured, his expression thoughtful. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. You have been most helpful. As we turned to leave, the groundskeeper called after us. There's something else you should know, gentlemen. We paused, looking back. Hawkins reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, which he held out on his weathered palm. It was an ivory elephant figurine, exquisitely carved, no more than 2 inches in height. Found this in the garden the morning after the Major disappeared, he explained. Under the east wing windows. Recognized it as his. He carried it always, said it was a lucky charm from his time in India. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he carefully took the figurine, examining it from all angles. May I ask why you did not bring this to Sir Henry's attention immediately? Hawkins looked uncomfortable. Wasn't sure what to make of it, sir. If the Major had somehow got out through the window, it made no sense. The bars are too narrow, and his room is on the second floor. And if someone else dropped it there? He trailed off, shaking his head. You feared it might implicate someone in the household, Poirot suggested gently. It's not my place to make accusations, the old man replied. I've served the Blackwoods all my life, but I can't make sense of this business, and that's the truth. As we walked back toward the house, Poirot turning the ivory elephant over thoughtfully in his fingers, I ventured a question that had been forming in my mind. Do you think the Major could have discovered some secret passage, Poirot? Something that allowed him to leave the locked room unseen? It is a possibility we must consider, mon ami. The evidence increasingly suggests that Blackwood Manor contains architectural secrets that are not documented in the current plans. But there are contradictions that trouble me, such as, if the Major discovered a secret exit from his room, why did he not take his evening clothes? Why leave a book pointedly open to a page about disappearing fakirs? It suggests theatrical preparation, does it not? And yet, he held up the ivory elephant. This small object was precious to him, a talisman. Would he deliberately leave it behind in the garden? Perhaps he dropped it accidentally while escaping, I suggested. Perhaps. But there is another interpretation, is there not? I considered. That someone else left it there to suggest he had fled? Précisément. Poirot beamed at me. Your detective instincts are improving, Hastings. Our conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Cecily Blackwood, who emerged from a side door of the manor and hurried toward us across the lawn. Monsieur Poirot, she called, her fair hair damp with mist, her face flushed with evident agitation. I must speak with you. I've remembered something important about Uncle Richard. We paused, waiting for her to reach us. Her blue eyes were wide with urgency. In the days before he disappeared, she said breathlessly, Uncle Richard spent hours in the library studying old maps of the estate grounds. He was particularly interested in the relationship between the house and the monastery ruins. The ruins? Poirot inquired. Where are they located? At the far end of the property, she replied, pointing toward a wooded area beyond the formal gardens. Little remains now, just stone foundations and a few crumbling walls. But Uncle Richard was convinced they were significant. He said the monk's message led there. The message referring to the treasure. She nodded. The day before he vanished, he told me he believed he had solved the monk's riddle. He seemed excited, but also nervous. He made me promise not to tell father. And you have kept this promise until now, Poirot observed. What has changed, mademoiselle? Cecily bit her lip. I found something in Uncle Richard's book, the one about Indian fakirs. A page had been dog-eared. She withdrew a folded paper from her pocket. This was pressed between the pages. Poirot unfolded the paper carefully. It contained a rough sketch of what appeared to be a floor plan, with annotations in a hasty scrawl. I recognized it as a partial rendering of the east wing, with particular attention to the thickness of the walls adjacent to Major Richard's room. A small cross had been marked at a point corresponding to the fireplace, and beside it were scribbled the words, mechanism in left corbel. Most significant, Poirot murmured, studying the sketch. When did you discover this, mademoiselle? Just now, she replied. I went to Uncle Richard's room. I'd been trying to understand why he would simply vanish. Father doesn't like me going in there, but I thought there might be some clue in his personal effects. You have done well to bring this to our attention, Poirot assured her. It may prove crucial to our investigation. As Cecily departed, I turned to Poirot with renewed excitement. A hidden mechanism in the fireplace. That must be how he left the room. It would seem a logical explanation, Poirot agreed. And yet, I find myself troubled by the convenient discovery of this sketch. It appears almost staged. You suspect Cecily of planting it? I suspect nothing without evidence, mon ami. But I observe that this case presents us with an abundance of clues, each pointing conveniently toward a romantic explanation involving secret passages and hidden treasures. It is almost as though someone wishes us to reach certain conclusions. But the ivory elephant, I protested. Surely that is genuine evidence. Without doubt, Poirot replied. And therein lies the contradiction that most intrigues me. We have theatrical elements that suggest deliberate misdirection, alongside physical evidence that indicates genuine struggle or flight. He tapped his forehead. The little grey cells, they are most perplexed. As we reached the manor, the mist had thickened once more, and the first heavy drops of renewed rainfall spattered against the ancient stones. I glanced up at the forbidding facade of the east wing, its narrow windows like watchful eyes in the gathering gloom. For a moment, I fancied I saw a shadow move behind one of the upper casements, a tall, robed figure that seemed to observe our return. I blinked, and it was gone. A trick of the fading light, no doubt. Yet as we stepped into the shelter of the entrance hall, I could not shake the unsettling feeling that Blackwood Manor itself was watching us, guarding its centuries-old secrets with implacable determination. Chapter 5. Footprints in the Garden. The following morning brought a dramatic change in the weather. The persistent rain that had shrouded Blackwood Manor in mist and gloom gave way to a pale November sun, weak but determined to assert itself through breaking clouds. Poirot, who had spent much of the night in contemplation of the various clues we had accumulated, announced over breakfast his intention to examine the grounds more thoroughly. The rainfall, Hastings, he explained, buttering a piece of toast with precise movements. It may have revealed to us what was previously concealed. You mean footprints? I inquired, recalling the single boot mark found in Major Richard's room. Exactement. Water is the great revealer, is it not? It exposes the foundations when they are weak. It uncovers that which has been buried. After completing our meal, we made our way outside. The grounds glistened with moisture, the manicured lawns and formal gardens transformed into a treacherous terrain of muddy patches and waterlogged flower beds. Poirot, with uncharacteristic disregard for his immaculate footwear, led the way around the east wing of the manor, his keen eyes scanning the ground before us. "Observe, Hastings," he said suddenly, pausing beneath a row of windows that I recognized as belonging to the east wing. "What do you see?" I followed his gaze to a particularly muddy section of earth that skirted the foundation of the house. There, clearly visible in the soft ground, was a series of footprints. They were deep and well-defined, the pattern of the sole distinctive. "Good Lord," I exclaimed. "They matched the single print we found in the Major's room." "Precisely so," Poirot confirmed, kneeling carefully to examine the impressions more closely. "And note the direction, mon ami. They lead from the house toward the garden, but do not return. Most curious, is it not?" I studied the trail of footprints. They emerged from beneath a small, rarely used side door, proceeding in a direct line across the muddiest section of ground before disappearing where the earth gave way to a gravel path. "Where do you suppose they lead?" I asked. "Let us follow and discover," Poirot replied, rising and brushing a speck of dirt from his trousers with a slight grimace. The footprints, though lost on the gravel, seemed to be heading in the direction of the old well that Hawkins had mentioned. We made our way across the grounds, past a series of yew hedges and an ancient sundial, until we reached a circular stone structure, partially covered with ivy. The well had clearly not been used for many years. Its wooden cover was weathered and moss-grown, and the winding mechanism had rusted into immobility. Poirot circled the structure slowly, examining every aspect with meticulous attention. "The ground here has been disturbed," he noted, indicating the earth around the base of the well. "Recently, too." Could the Major have come here the night he disappeared? I wondered aloud. "It is possible," Poirot conceded. "But why? And how does this connect to the locked room?" He began to examine the stonework of the well itself, his fingers probing the ancient mortar between the blocks. Suddenly he paused, his expression sharpening with interest. "This stone," he murmured, indicating a block near the base of the well. "It has been removed and replaced. Observe the fresh mortar, still soft from the rain." I knelt beside him and saw that he was correct. One of the stones had indeed been recently disturbed, the material surrounding it noticeably different in color and texture from the rest. With delicate precision, Poirot worked at the stone with his pocket knife. It came loose with surprising ease, revealing a small cavity behind. Reaching inside, he withdrew an object that glinted dully in the pale sunlight. "The Major's pocket watch," I breathed, recognizing the heavy silver timepiece. Poirot opened it carefully. The hand had stopped at precisely 12:42. "The early hours of the morning," he observed. "Perhaps the very moment of his disappearance." "But why would anyone hide it here?" I asked, perplexed. "That, mon ami, is the question we must answer." Poirot replaced the stone loosely and straightened up, slipping the watch into his pocket. "I suggest we expand our investigation. The groundskeeper mentioned ruins of the old monastery. I should like to see them." We made our way through the formal gardens and into a wooded area beyond, where the remnants of ancient walls emerged from dense undergrowth. Little remained of the monastery, save for crumbling foundations and the occasional standing arch, its original purpose long forgotten. Poirot moved among the ruins with careful steps, his eyes missing nothing. The soil has been disturbed here also, he noted, indicating a patch of earth near what appeared to have been the monastery's chapel. Something was buried and then unburied. Recently? Within the past week, I should say. He bent down, scooping up a small quantity of the soil and transferring it to a handkerchief, which he folded carefully and placed in his pocket. We shall see if this earth has anything to tell us. As the afternoon progressed, Poirot insisted on conducting what he termed a scientific experiment involving the windows of the east wing. With night falling early in November, we waited until dusk, and then Poirot positioned me in the garden while he went inside to examine how light traveled through the various windows. Remain here, Hastings, he instructed, and observe which windows illuminate, and in what sequence. I stood in the damp garden for nearly half an hour, watching as Poirot moved systematically through the east wing, a lamp visible as a golden glow behind each window in turn. Most remarkable was his discovery that one particular window, not belonging to Major Richard's room, but to a supposedly sealed chamber adjacent to it, showed signs of recent use. The casement has been opened, he informed me when he rejoined me in the garden. The pane has cracked around the edges, and there are fresh scratches on the sill. Yet this room is part of the disused section of the wing, allegedly sealed off for decades. Someone has been using it secretly, I concluded. So it would appear. Poirot's gaze swept the darkening grounds. I should like to examine more closely those monastery ruins tomorrow in better light. But first, let us see what the soil samples can tell us. Upon returning to our rooms, Poirot laid out the various specimens of earth he had collected on separate sheets of paper. From his valise, he produced a small magnifying glass and several glass vials containing clear liquids. What followed was a demonstration of the scientific approach to detection that I had witnessed on several occasions. The soil from the garden beneath the east wing, he explained, examining a pinch of earth under his magnifying glass, contains traces of a white powder, not natural to the soil, I think. What sort of powder? I asked. That we shall discover. He mixed a small quantity with one of his chemicals, which immediately turned a pale blue. Ah, most interesting. What is it? Plaster dust, mon ami, fine particles that come from newly disturbed masonry. From the stone in the well? Possibly, but observe this sample from the monastery ruins. He performed a similar test, which yielded a different reaction. This contains traces of something quite different. Unless I am much mistaken, it is wax. Candle wax, to be precise. Someone has been visiting the ruins at night, I suggested. Indeed, and recently enough that the wax has not fully degraded in the soil. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. Our mystery deepens, does it not? We have a man who vanishes from a locked room, leaving behind a single footprint that matches those leading to a well where his watch is hidden. We have recently disturbed earth containing traces of candle wax at ancient ruins that he was known to be researching. And we have a supposedly sealed room with a window that has been secretly used. It all points to Major Richard having discovered some secret way out of his room, I said. Perhaps through the fireplace mechanism that Cecily's sketch indicated. Perhaps, Poirot agreed, though I detected a note of reservation in his tone. But if so, where is he now? And why has he not returned? No, Hastings, there are currents beneath the surface of this case that we have yet to fathom. The Major was searching for something of value, something hidden centuries ago. The question is, did he find it? And did someone else wish to possess it? The following morning brought a summons from Sir Henry. We found him in the library, his usual robustness diminished by evident strain and lack of sleep. There have been developments, he informed us tersely. My daughter claims to have seen the Black Monk last night, near the ruins, and my sister swears she heard Richard's voice calling out from the east wing. Most dramatic, Poirot commented. And you yourself, Sir Henry, have you experienced any unusual phenomena? A flicker of something, embarrassment perhaps, crossed the baronet's face. I am not given to flights of fancy, Monsieur Poirot, but I will admit that last night, passing the east wing, I detected a distinct odor of Indian tobacco, the particular blend that Richard favored. It was most unsettling. I see, Poirot murmured. The plot, as they say, thickens. I want this resolved, Sir Henry declared firmly. The household is in a state of nervous collapse. My wife speaks of calling in an exorcist, for God's sake. I need rational explanations, Monsieur Poirot, not ghost stories. I believe I may soon be in a position to provide them, Poirot assured him. With your permission, I should like to conduct an experiment this evening, one that may shed considerable light on these mysterious occurrences. Sir Henry agreed readily, and as we departed the library, I turned to Poirot with undisguised curiosity. What sort of experiment do you have in mind? A small, enigmatic smile played about his lips. One that will bring our phantom monk and our missing major into the light, mon ami. The time has come to resolve this mystery once and for all. Chapter 6. The Hidden Passage. The remainder of the day passed in a curious state of expectancy. Poirot spent several hours in meticulous preparation for his experiment, the nature of which he declined to elaborate upon despite my repeated inquiries. He dispatched telegrams to London, conducted further examination of the soil samples he had collected, and engaged in a lengthy private conversation with Inspector Japp, who had arrived unexpectedly from London at Poirot's request. By evening, a palpable tension had settled over Blackwood Manor. The household gathered in the library at 8 o'clock, as Poirot had requested. Sir Henry and Lady Eleanor sat side by side on a leather Chesterfield, their demeanours suggesting a shared anxiety. Lady Lavinia occupied an armchair near the fire, her imperious bearing somewhat diminished by the nervous manner in which she repeatedly smoothed her skirts. Cecily perched on a window seat, her fair features composed, but her eyes watchful. Dr. Mortimer stood by the bookshelves, thumbing through a volume with apparent casualness, though I noticed his gaze frequently darting toward Poirot. Inspector Japp positioned himself discreetly by the door, while the groundskeeper, Thomas Hawkins, hovered uncomfortably near the entrance, clearly unaccustomed to being included in such gatherings. Even the butler had been asked to attend, standing stiffly at attention as though on parade. Poirot surveyed the assembled company with a measured gaze before stepping to the center of the room. The library's ornate clock struck the half-hour, its chimes seeming unusually loud in the expectant silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed room, "I have asked you to gather this evening because I believe I can now explain the mystery of Major Richard Blackwood's disappearance." He paused, allowing his words to settle upon his audience. I observed a ripple of reactions: apprehension, curiosity, and in one case, what appeared to be carefully concealed alarm. "Before I reveal my conclusions," Poirot continued, "I must first explain certain historical aspects of this most interesting house. Blackwood Manor, built during the reign of Henry VIII, was designed with features characteristic of the period, particularly those found in houses owned by families with Catholic sympathies during a time of religious persecution." He moved to the large table where architectural plans of the house had been spread out. English manor houses of this era frequently contained what are commonly known as priest holes, hidden chambers and secret passages designed to conceal Catholic priests during periods when practicing the old religion carried severe penalties. These architectural secrets were often known only to the head of the household, their existence passed down through generations by word of mouth rather than documented in plans. "This is all very interesting, Monsieur Poirot," Sir Henry interjected, "but what relevance does it have to my brother-in-law's disappearance?" "The most direct relevance, Sir Henry," Poirot replied smoothly. "For you see, Major Richard discovered what generations of Blackwoods had either forgotten or deliberately concealed, that the east wing of this house contains an elaborate system of hidden passages." A murmur ran through the assembled company. Lady Lavinia leaned forward in her chair, her eyes bright with vindication. "I've always said as much," she declared. "The East Wing has secrets. That's why it was sealed off all those years ago, not because of structural weakness, as we were told." Poirot nodded. "Indeed, madame, and through careful examination of architectural inconsistencies, I have located the entrance to one such passage." He turned towards Sir Henry. "It lies behind the fireplace in Major Richard's room, accessible through a pivoting mechanism concealed in the left corbel, precisely as indicated in the sketch found by Mademoiselle Cecily." "And you believe Richard used this passage to leave his locked room?" Lady Eleanor asked, a tremor in her voice. "That is one possibility," Poirot acknowledged, "but it doesn't explain all the facts of the case. For instance, why was the Major's pocket watch hidden in the well? Why was a single boot print left in his room? Why did he abandon his personal effects but take his medication?" Poirot began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. To understand what truly occurred, we must first understand what Major Richard was seeking. The legend of the Black Monk and the hidden treasure is not merely a family ghost story. It contains elements of historical truth. During the dissolution of the monasteries, valuable religious artifacts were indeed concealed by those who wished to preserve them from destruction. You're suggesting that Richard found this treasure? Sir Henry asked skeptically. I am suggesting, Sir Henry, that he believed he had found evidence of its location. The secret passages leading from the east wing connect to the sealed cellars and ultimately provide access to the old monastery grounds by an underground route emerging near the well. Cecily gasped. That's why he was so interested in the relationship between the house and the ruins. Precisely, mademoiselle. Your uncle had pieced together historical clues, suggesting that the Catholic treasures were hidden somewhere within this network of passages and chambers. Poirot paused beside the table, lifting the ivory elephant figurine that had been found in the garden. But Major Richard was not the only one who had deduced the treasure's existence. Someone else had followed his research with great interest, someone who decided to take action when it appeared the Major was on the verge of discovery. The room fell silent as Poirot's gaze moved deliberately across the assembled faces, finally coming to rest on Dr. Mortimer. The physician's composed expression faltered slightly. I have observed, Dr. Mortimer, that your fingerprints match those found on the medieval manuscripts Major Richard was studying. The white powder discovered beneath the east wing windows is identical to plaster residue found on your clothing, and most significantly, chemical analysis of the residue in the Major's water glass reveals traces of a powerful sedative, one only a medical practitioner would have ready access to. Dr. Mortimer's face had drained of color. This is preposterous, he protested weakly. Is it? Poirot countered. Let us reconstruct what occurred. You had been monitoring Major Richard's research, realizing he was close to discovering the Blackwood treasure, a collection of Tudor-era Catholic artifacts of immense historical and monetary value. On the night in question, you administered a sedative to his drinking water. Once he was unconscious, you used the secret passage, which you had already explored, to enter his room, leaving a single boot print as evidence of an intruder. You then transported the unconscious Major through the passages to a forgotten chamber beneath the monastery ruins, intending to force him to reveal the treasure's precise location when he awoke. In your haste, you dropped the ivory elephant in the garden. Later, you concealed the Major's pocket watch in the well, a deliberate red herring to suggest he had fled the premises. This is fantasy, Dr. Mortimer insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. You have no proof. On the contrary, Poirot replied calmly. Inspector Japp has spent the afternoon examining the chamber beneath the ruins, where he discovered clear evidence of recent occupation, food wrappers, a lantern, and most significantly, distinctive cigarette ends matching the Indian tobacco favored by Major Richard. Japp stepped forward. We've also found documents in your cottage, Doctor, showing correspondence with certain antiquities dealers regarding the potential sale of recently discovered Tudor religious artifacts. The doctor seemed to deflate before our eyes, his scholarly demeanor crumbling into desperation. You don't understand, he said hoarsely. These treasures have historical significance beyond the comprehension of the Blackwood family. They would have sold them to the highest bidder or locked them away in a bank vault. I intended to ensure they reached the proper museums with just a small commission for myself. It was never about harming Richard. And yet harm him you did, Poirot observed. Where is Major Blackwood now, Doctor? Dr. Mortimer's shoulders slumped in defeat. He's alive, in the chamber beneath the old chapter house. I've been keeping him sedated. I never intended. It was only supposed to be temporary, until I could secure the artifacts and be well away. Sir Henry surged to his feet, his face contorted with fury, but Japp intervened swiftly. I'll need you to lead us to him immediately, Doctor, and I'll be taking you into custody on charges of kidnapping and false imprisonment. As Dr. Mortimer was led away under Japp's supervision, with Sir Henry and Hawkins accompanying them to locate the hidden chamber, a stunned silence fell over the remaining company. I simply cannot believe it, Lady Eleanor murmured eventually. James Mortimer has been our family physician for 15 years. The lure of historical treasures can be most compelling, Madame, Poirot replied gently, particularly to a man of scholarly inclinations and limited means. And the treasure? Lady Lavinia inquired eagerly. Was it real? Did Richard truly find it? Poirot smiled. That, I believe, is a question best answered by the Major himself, once he is safely recovered. Later that evening, as we awaited news in the library, a weary but triumphant Sir Henry returned to announce that his brother-in-law had been found alive, though weakened by his ordeal. The chamber where he had been held contained not only evidence of Dr. Mortimer's crimes, but also proof that Major Richard had indeed discovered the legendary Blackwood treasure, a collection of exquisitely crafted golden chalices, jeweled reliquaries, and illuminated manuscripts, concealed centuries ago within the sealed cellars beneath the east wing. The Black Monk's curse has claimed another victim, Lady Lavinia remarked with grim satisfaction. Every man who has sought the treasure has met with misfortune. Not a curse, madame, Poirot corrected her gently, but the timeless motivations of human nature, greed, ambition, and the desire to possess that which is forbidden. The past may cast long shadows at Blackwood Manor, but it is the actions of the living, not the dead, that have created this mystery.